Welcome to Thinking Deeply about Primary Education, the podcast that gives you a peek inside the minds of some truly inspirational teachers. This week, I'm delighted to welcome the one, the only, Lloyd Williams-Jones back onto the podcast to talk about all things primary education. Since his appearance on the TDaPE pilot, Lloyd has gone on to establish himself as a highly effective deputy head teacher. We discuss his journey this year, his approach to leadership, and how his school's implementation of the popular WalkThrus program has gone. I have absolutely no doubt that you're going to love this episode. So without further ado, let's spend some time thinking deeply about primary education. So Lloyd, it's great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So obviously this isn't your first time on the show. You're a teacher, deputy head teacher, research enthusiast, theme tune composer, regular chat contributor, and guest on the very first episode of TDaPE. Tell us about what you've been up to since you were last interviewed.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I feel like I'm some sort of like legacy guest here. I was the original starting member of the podcast, which feels quite nice to be back. And I tell you what, like what's come after me, I mean, blimey, was just gone up from there, and now it's take a slight dip back down and back up again from after me. No, it's absolute pleasure to be back on as an interview. You know, it's been, and I must add this at the start. I think this podcast has been quite revolutionary for quite a lot of people, and that's been seen and shared and felt on Twitter and other platforms. And I do think that, you know, there needs to be a credit given to it, because like and that's for all the contributors, you know. And I think that what they've brought to the platform, and their advice, their insight has been superb. I know many educators have benefited off the back of that, and I think you just sometimes need to stop and look back a bit and just go, like, you know, and I'll talk about this later with my own career, but I think just with the podcast, I think it's just an added at the start that we just at this point just take a stop and go, wow, look at some of the content that has been produced, that you've produced, that like has just gone towards developing people and furthering people and making people reflect and get better. I guarantee you, if there was some way of measuring how TDaPE could have an impact on schools, it would be fantastic, and I can guarantee you it would have an impact. Let's keep growing it. Because I do think it is it's a special thing, and I think you know, I think it's worth the continued investment in it. So just wanted to add that at the start. So right, yeah, what have I been up to? Oh gosh, I mean, it was quite a year, wasn't it? I mean, for everyone, that school year, that academic year was insane, is the word to describe it. Insane, and I sort of reflected now in some holidays, now taking a bit of time to just actually stop and go, well, hang on. What was that? Literally, like, and realize just how much happened in that year. And for me, stepping into the deputy role in a school, in an RI school, in a pandemic, new to deputy headship, new to an RI school, new to a you know, new school, new to a school that I, you know, a new setting, was very challenging, very challenging, at times really hard, but also extremely rewarding. And I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. And we've come a long way. We've come a long way as a school, and I think I've probably come a long way as a practitioner as well. I've learned a lot the hard way as well. You know, I'll get into that later a bit probably, but like it's not easy. And it's been a steep learning curve for me this year in terms of one of the biggest things is, you know, I would say has been people, like managing people, how to manage teams and stuff like, and how to really genuinely on the ground enact change. And that for me has been the biggest like wowzers. I've been in a leadership position before, but this time the reins have been given to me, and like I said, I've learned an awful lot. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So lots of forward movement with school. Submitted a few proposals to our research ed talks that are coming up. That's quite nice. Done a few bits with you guys on TDaPE, which is nice. And just sort of and there's an element of survival as well. It's been a bit about survival as well through this year. Like, and I'm sure other teachers will reflect and sort of agree with me on that. It has been a bit, just get the year done. But I mean, a year on. It's about a year on from when we recorded, probably about that. I would say.
Yeah, I think we recorded that first episode in October. Yeah, and I wasn't expecting those kind words at the start, and I think none of what we've done would have been possible had when I messaged you, at the start of the academic year and said, I think there's some scope for a primary focused podcast. And you sort of said, yeah, let's go for it. And then from there, the rest of the regular contributors got involved, and the things just sort of propelled themselves from there. I could see a massive difference in the Lloyd who applied for the deputy headship and the Lloyd not. Just in conversations with people, you've almost like grown into your skin, because we always knew you had the technical skills, you had the knowledge, but this year really putting it into practice, I think you can see you've just blossomed in the role. And so I'm really looking forward to talking to you about all the things you've managed to achieve this year. I think a good place to start is you're making seismic shifts in the way your school approaches curriculum and teaching and learning. What does the roadmap look like, and how is it going now that you're an academic year into your sort of project?
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's school improvement is tough. It's really tough. Like when you boil it down, it's nuanced, it's complicated, but it's simple at the same time. That sounds ridiculous and contradictory. And I'll talk later about some of those key simple elements that focus on. It gets more muddy and difficult when you start drilling down into it, and you start to unpick some of the more human elements, I guess, of school improvement. I think they're the bits for me that I found they've made me think a lot and maybe reflect a lot. But no, we've made some massive shifts this year with our school and what we've done, and I sat down at the start of the year with my head Lucy, who is wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful, and I must give her full credit, because find a head supports you like Lucy does, because genuinely I landed on my feet coming into a school where I have she's an experienced head teacher. She has been at an executive level in a MAT and has come back and sort of decided to come back to really craft as a head again, and just got a wealth of experience teaching in London for many, many years. And she saw something in me, and she knew straight away and said, the biggest thing is the trust. She goes, you know your stuff. She's like, and I trust you to make the right decisions, or to lead us down the right paths, because you're reflective. That's what she said, and because I'm not going to go there on, just on a whim. I'm going to go there on what the best sort of, I say the best, good reading suggests, and good conversation with much smarter people than I. And I'll go down that route, and then we'll reflect all the time, and talk to staff, and it's that constant process. But she's allowed me to do that, and that for me has been that. I think, like you said, that's allowed me to grow into my skin. That is exactly how that's happened through her. I must credit her for that. So that's an enormous factor as a deputy head, and I'll again probably talk later on about the principles of being a deputy head, or if you're new to deputy headship or whatever. That's a big one, and I think that support has been enormous. So when we sat down at the beginning of the year, I said, look, this is a big task. I came in and I looked at our curriculum. I was like, right, I obviously wanted to make changes. I looked at it and thought, I'm not saying what was there was bad. It was just, I know it could be better, and I know what we could do. We could craft something and build something for curriculum and the whole vision of curriculum, teacher, learning in school. But that stuff takes time. That stuff is not, like you say, it wasn't built in a day. And that's hard, wrestling that stuff. So, like you said, the roadmap is key. To have a direction and have a strategic plan and drive to what you want to do is very important. Now, so I sat down and I created a strategic curriculum development plan. And I said, right, how do I do this? And I sat down and I remember thrashing this out with Lucy and going, right, how do we do this? How do we do that? How's the best way to approach this? What I didn't want was things that were held by arbitrary timeframes. I didn't want to be sat there, and when I drafted the plan out, I spent a couple of days in my office just thrashing it out, laying down, right, where do we start here? We start with humanities, right? We start with geography and history, and we're going to build some. And I had the whole crazy post-its on the wall, and there was string, and I'm like in the office, it was everywhere. It was just like Lucy's coming in and going, "Are you all right, Mac?" I'm like, yeah. So when we talked, we thrashed around, and then she get sucked in and being with me for an hour, and we could, it was this kind of process. It was messy to begin with, and we needed to wade through to go, right, hang on, what is priority? Because like Chris says before, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? So what is the priority? That's it. What are priorities, right? How do we order these priorities? First is the ordering of the priorities. Then it's about, right, what I decided and we decided at school was to organize it into phases of development, right? Now that, and this is where I'll go back to the point I made about arbitrary time stamps. For me, the old milestones kind of approach, I just don't, I know there's always time pressures in school, right? Everybody wants everything done yesterday in schools. Everybody, the government want it done yesterday. The local authority want it done yesterday. Whatever, your math want it done yesterday. Everybody wants it done yesterday. It can't be done yesterday, right? So it has to be done today and tomorrow, right? So we have to be like, right, how do we organize this strategic thinking so that we make our way through it in a phased way that is not determined by silly time pointers, that you go, well, end of term 2, review, fill in the Word document. What is it? That is not, I just don't believe in that stuff. I think it's a load of nonsense. And I think what that does, it drives silly practices, and you end up with contrived results. You end up in the position where schools are saying they've done things and they haven't really done things, and things have been implemented, but they haven't been implemented. When you talk to the teachers and they go, well, yeah, we're doing it, but it's not really working, and we're just saying we're doing it because local authority, SIP, comes along and goes, oh, well done, tick in the box, and that's not what school improvement is. That's not it, right? And it's more nuanced than that. It's more fluid. It's more dynamic and responsive than that. And that is the model we need to think about. And I think Harry Fletcher Wood wrote a fantastic blog about this, about, I can't remember what he called it, iterative responsiveness. I apologize, because I'll have to look at, maybe we can find it, put it in the show notes. But it's a fantastic blog about school improvement and about that iterative, responsive, reflective process of doing it. And that's kind of what I channel when I come to looking at how we move through it and how I created that strategic plan. So we split it into 3 phases. So phase 1 was very much the kind of, it ended up being humanities, history, geography, and science. They were the 3 kind of first places to start, because we wanted to build our curriculum out from there at the core of your wider curriculum. Now, I'm not talking about maths and English at the moment. I'm just talking about the kind of wider foundation subjects and stuff. We started there, and then phase 2 grows into your RE, and we look then at DT, PSHE. So we, you see what I mean? So we start to grow, and then phase 3 then on to the other subjects like PE and so on and so forth. So we've kind of carefully mapped this out in a way that, what is strategic? What do we need to look at first that will build us a core of curriculum strength that can come out, and then in time this will happen, right? So Like I said, what I didn't do is phase 1 finishes in April and is reviewed. That's not how this works. This is just a constant document. It's a dynamic document that I come back to and I revisit all the time. I have it actually on the wall in my office, just in front of me on a massive board, and I'm constantly looking at it every day. I know I can see, and I'll put the phases up, and I work, and I'm looking at where we are in the phase. So it's there all the time. Basically, what is really important is that, and again, like I think this is worth saying, is that it's not okay. Phase 1 has ended. Now we're on to phase 2. There's obviously overlap between phase 1 and phase 2, which is exactly where we are now. We are finishing up phase 1 and we're moving into phase 2, because curriculum's never done, is it? Curriculum is iterative. Curriculum is a dialogue. It's never finished. So we must keep that in mind at all times. So, and we've drawn on the work of Neil has come in and worked with us, and Victoria. They've both been in to help us shape our geography and our history sequencing and work on that. Obviously, we're a local authority school, so we have, we don't have the luxury afforded to academies, but we do have the ability to order things and take advice from experts like Neil and Victoria, and go, right, do you know what? Actually, this is going to really help us kind of make this a coherence in the curriculum, make the progression model the curriculum, so that when I have those discussions with the big O come September, which fingers crossed they're going to come, because that's the thing. It's like we're just, we're waiting for them to come, and I am more than happy for them to come. Like, come on down, because I'd love to chat. I'm quite looking forward to chatting through with an inspector and going, do you know what are we saying on this? Because this is where we're at. This is what we are intending to do. This is what we've done so far. This is our strategic plan and where we're going. And again, I'll say to them, like, I'm not putting time frames on this. And Lucy and I talked this through and gone, right, well, actually, do you know what? It is so important that we check in all the time. We check in all the time and we talk all the time about it, but we don't limit it or constrain it by that arbitrary nature. So it's knowing when, and this is one thing, again, this year I've learned, is like, it's knowing when to go off the shelf as a stopgap, and when to go, and that's fine. It's absolutely fine to go off the shelf. Do you know what I mean? There's no problem. Like, what I'm suggesting is, like, I'm not suggesting every school goes out and from the ground up writes the curriculum, because it's feasibly in a state school, if you're a single state school, like, and support, to write your own curriculum is bonkers. Like, it is like, the enormity of that task is beyond, like, if you're afforded the luxury of having some, a team or the resource to do it, great, it is fantastic. Because anything that you do get off the shelf, you must make that reflect your school, your context, and more importantly, your community. We have a very large Gypsy Romany traveller community in our school, and it's very important that I can't remember, it was Mary Meyer refers to the windows and mirrors, isn't it? I can't remember if she's quoting someone else on that, but that your curriculum being a window and a mirror, that your children see themselves back in the curriculum, but they also have opportunities to look out and see and get in that enrichment from further opportunities. And it's very, very important for us, that's been, and a big thing. Particularly, we have 17% Gypsy Romany traveller community, so it's quite, we're over national. Curriculum does that. The children come in and feel their representation of Gypsy Romany traveller heritage in it. That when they see representations of travel, for example, that they see, in early units like transport units in year 1 or whatever that we looked at designing, that a Vardo's in there. Like a Vardo wagon is in there. I've had to do a lot of reading and researching and talking to the community to learn and understand and get further into that culture, to make sure that I can enact those changes in our curriculum to be reflective of that community. So like we've worked with specialists from the local authority on Gypsy Romany traveller community heritage, and we've weaved through where it makes sense. Again, this goes back to this, not tenuous links, where the links are perfectly lined up. Like transport is a perfect one, right? Where it is, like, not forcing in, because that's the other thing. We don't want a contrived curriculum where children, feel like, well, why is this? What are we talking about this for? The ancient Greeks and Gypsy Romany. There's no clear link or whatever. So we work really, really hard to to kind of thread through, bake in where it is appropriate at the appropriate moments, that representation and that their history and their heritage. So it's things like that, that you're not going to get that off the shelf. You're not going to get that off the shelf. You're not going to go and get that from the Reach Academy materials, which are fantastic materials. But you're not going to get that. So it's important that schools, if you do that, but that's not to say that you shouldn't take those materials. Like, they're fantastic materials. There are a range of fantastic materials are available that you can go and do and get. And if you're in a position of school improvement where you need to make changes quite quickly because things are in a very challenging position, then that is probably a good option, right? And you pull those levers. So we decided not to do that. We've done our phased strategic approach, because I guess my knowledge and my sort of experience is able to come into the role and drive that and be able to have access to the TDaPE team and access to Twitter and access to reading and things that potentially maybe other leaders might not have access to, which has allowed me. And I'm not taking credit for this. What I'm gonna do is pass the credit to the people who develop these ideas and have these conversations with me and who come in and work with us. And they're the people that help really drive our school improvement, because they're the people who come in and offer us that insight and that knowledge and that, and then we're able to act on it and move it forward. But it's, that's kind of where we're at with. So we're into end of phase one, moving into phase two. We've managed to hit a lot of phase one criteria that we set out in terms of substantive knowledge, looking at mapping and coherence, and we set all that out, and just getting all that stuff across to teachers for a year, just with history and geography. That, starting there, talking about first and second order concepts, and really starting to go, do you know what, actually, this is what this is about. This is what these subjects, these domains are about. And it was an eye opener for our staff. I think, probably would be for a lot of schools, in our area, I would imagine, right? If I'm speaking locally about the sort of context in Kent, that those sorts of things were like, what, some of these terms, some of the terminology, what's been quite nice has been it's been reflected in quite a lot of the Ofsted subject reports that have come out, particularly history, geography, and science. All the messages and all the things that I talk to teachers about, I scared the living daylights out of them within last September, by just sort of mentioning casually some of these words, and they're going, what? Like, has all come up in these reports. And they're talking about these concepts, these ideas, these things that are pertinent to curriculum and effective curriculums. And we're now au fait with our teachers with that. We talk about first and second order substantive knowledge. We talk about those things. We talk about the hinterland. We talk about these are things that will come up in conversation in our staff meetings and things now, which is, for me, really gives me like a warm glow, because like when I sort of came in and there was nothing, and now we have discussion around it, and it's just fantastic. And I mean, like, side to the wider curriculum, we've also the sort of that strategic planning. We obviously have still been developing our maths and English, the core. We obviously still been working. We've worked with yourself as a specialist with the hubs, and of course we've developed our reading. So that's been quite a seismic shift as well, in terms of, again, that wasn't necessarily in our strategic roadmap. That was a sort of that kind of sat separately, and have worked with Chris to sort of implement the strategies and ideas in his book. We've been rolling that out since back in March, just after March, April time. We started our journey, our phased approach. And I think it's worth adding now as well, Chris's book is absolutely stunning. And I've said this in tweets before, and I would say it again, and I don't need to say it. I mean, 15,000 images on everybody's timeline of the book front cover says everything you need to know about how important that book is, really. And I said it, and I knew it back when I read the draft back in, when it was in November time, whatever. I thought, whoa, this is like super important. And I knew I'd like to get that out to our schools, to my school, sorry, as soon as I could, because I realized how much of it we weren't doing and how much of it wasn't like in practice. And it's such a core, you're a reader before you're anything. And I think that was like, right, let's go. So working with Chris closely, very, very generously of him, he's supported us with our implementation of the approach. And we're coming into now September, full implementation, having spent several months iterating, refining, and we're still not done, but we're going to be coming in to September with close reads, extended reads, fluency reads. All our teachers know and have seen all those sessions modeled, have practiced all those sessions, have fed back all of it with fluency checks. And yeah, it's so that's massive. And yeah, there's been some huge implementation. We put Insight in as a system. I mean, it was, and for those of you that haven't used Insight as a tracking system, it is absolutely sublime. Like in terms of the flexibility of the system, what it can track, what it can tell you, what signals it can give you as a school to understand the context, understand what's going on at a more macro level. It's kind of, there's not a product that I've experienced in my teaching career that has come close to doing what it can do in terms of its flexibility. So we put that in for our teachers, and and we've done all our school reports through that system, which generates everything, cut load of work, load down. So yeah, so whole reading scheme, we shifted all our writing, we put Insight in, we've done massive development on wider curriculum with our strategic curriculum development plan. But we still have that kind of strategic approach with our overall wider stuff, whilst giving a continued focus to our English and maths, as the year goes, we're working with the leaders and empowering those middle leaders to own their subject as well. That's another thing that I've really, really realized is distributed leadership is absolutely vital, and that you grow leaders and you make sure that they feel fully supported. They have access to the knowledge that I have access to. I want to give them that in a way that doesn't overburden them, in the way that supports them and makes them feel kind of like gives them those boosters that they need to keep powering forward with their subject. And so that's been interesting working. And I've learned a tremendous amount from Lucy on distributed leadership and I can quite honestly say I've never worked in a school that has had such strong distributed leadership as the one I'm in now, where the saying everyone's a leader and all that. I genuinely feel that in my school at the minute. Like, there is a very open dialogic approach to school improvement. We sit around the table, there's no surprises. We have large SLT meetings, we get round the table with all our leaders. It's not just me and Lucy go in a room and make some decisions at all. We sit around and we talk things through, and we have and we thrash things out, and we really, really go in and say, right, that's over to you now. Go and you go, and so what are you going to do? What are you, putting the power back into the leaders. And then when they if they come unstuck, well, then we support and we go, right, okay, so what are we, because if you don't give people that space, that autonomy to be able to go, I own this subject and I'm going to drive it. I could very easily be like, I need all the reins, and you do this and you do this. And part of me, two things would happen. One, my teachers would become, and my leaders would become less empowered. Two, I'd probably end up losing the plot because I don't have the capacity, being an operational deputy head teacher, to do all of that. I still teach, I still have to do all the things deputy heads do, manage behaviour, managing all of the cover, everything else that goes with the role. And I know I'd start smashing plates. So that's why that distributed leadership structure is vital, really, for a really sort of effective school. Been a mad year, but we've our curriculum learning and teaching and learning has come a long way. Even in just a year, we've made some huge ground.
Yeah, what a year! So much coming through there. I think a lot of parallels with recent chat with Gareth Rain. He was saying how he had mapped out the journey he wanted his school to go on to. St. Peter's, he took over in March, April time, and actually the staff showed themselves that they were ready and engaged enough to sort of progress through quite quickly. So if he, head teacher with 10 years experience, 20 years as a teacher, is come to the same conclusions, and working in the same way, that can be no bad thing. One thing that really interests me is the distributed leadership. What does support look like for the middle leader who isn't necessarily an expert in their subject? Because we can't all have DT experts in our schools. What does your support look like on the ground for those middle leaders?
Great question, important question, and for me, comes down to your biggest currency for developing your middle leaders properly is time. That's your biggest currency, because if you have to carve out time for them, you have to do it. We simply cannot, in the modern age of teaching, expect people as middle leaders to just grow on their own in their spare time. Teaching it's mental busy. Like the workload of a teacher is bonkers. One afternoon a term or whatever, if you're the lead of DT or whatever, then are you going to genuinely improve as a middle leader there? Is that going to help you? So there's a couple of things that need to happen really to support middle leaders properly. Time is the first thing. We build into our curriculum, into our weekly timetable, a cover slot, a curriculum cover slot, whereby it's a responsive model where every week, depending on the needs and depending on the phase and the strategy and where we are with the plan, they have time to work with me one-to-one on curriculum and on their leadership and on their learning plans and their vision and how they want to implement and all these sorts of things. We work together to look, and it may be and it could be a case of, like, for example, this year I was with my humanities lead. My humanities lead took a lot of those slots this year because that was what was needed. That's not to say that the other leaders just didn't have nothing, and they still had release time on top of that. They still had a regular release. But on top of the regular termly release that we distribute, we have an extra curriculum after learning slot, which then goes to really getting down into the detail with those middle leaders. And I've worked with all of them. I worked with all of them this year, different proportions because I've given the plans, but they've all been given time reading. Sometimes I will work with them. Sometimes we'll sit together and we'll work on a document, or we'll work together strategically for the afternoon. Sometimes I go, do you know what? There's a fantastic video on Myatt and Co. About implementation, or about middle leadership. Go and watch that for me, and then come back. We'll talk at the end of the afternoon, and there's these sorts of things, and we look at them. What leverages we can get from that? Or I say, can you have a look? Here's some sources. Let's go. Can you go and have a little look and research a little bit about that and do some reading? Giving them that time to do it, right? If you don't give them the time to do it, a busy middle leader in a leading a subject whilst running a class, whilst managing a family at home, and they when are they finding that time to grow? And again, the other thing I think that is important to development leadership is the appraisal process, is making sure that fits in to the appraisal process, and the appraisal process is done properly. It's not done in a way which we know. Well, I know certainly it can be done and has been done in over my career. So yeah, I think it's about, like I say, the main takeaway will be time, and will be time, because in that time comes the investment, comes the support. And then it may be a case, even in those times, that we walk out together as a subject leader and a deputy, and we go and we talk to children, and we look, and we get a picture of what's going on, and we start to think about what our teachers need further for support. So I think that is vital. Build in a flexible, if you can, a flexible time that is a responsive, flexible curriculum slot for the week, or something along those lines. And whilst also maintaining a regular release slot, front loading where you need to, depending on where the subject is and where your context is as a school and what's going on. I think that's, for me, has been like I say, I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch, and I'm sure there's many different sort of other ways you could do it, but that's what we do and what I found. I've not seen that before, and I have found it extremely important in terms of what we've been able to do this year. That has been a massive, massive lever for us. So
what really comes across there is how much you've invested in their development, your principles are really clear, I would find it very difficult to imagine they won't improve and become really competent subject leaders, with that kind of investment, of time, refined, sort of focused approach to what is important. How does this fit in with how we want you to develop as a leader? It makes a lot of sense. And, it sounds like you're doing absolutely fantastic stuff. So you've done a lot of work to put systems in place to support your teachers in their professional development. What opportunities have they had, and what is your approach to professional learning?
Right, yeah. So again, I sort of touched there on your previous question about developing middle leaders, but developing all staff. Like I say, that important, that distributed leadership is so important to us in our context, and we really champion and value it. So there's two elements to it. There's your 1%, right? Chris Morris talks about your 1%, and improving all your 1%. All of a sudden, everything adds up, from the smallest things. Where, for example, every briefing on a Friday morning, I share a little snippet, a little technique, or like a little nugget from something that they can go, wow, that's really nice. I think it might be in Victoria with the just list of things to just practice quickly for retrieval, things like that. You share a small technique that is gonna, if teachers are doing that, that's brilliant, right? Or another fantastic little technique, the brain and the pen. I know Chris has talked about this one before, where I think he has. I don't know if he hasn't, then full credit to him, because it's where I pinched that idea, where I pinch all my ideas from it. I never come up with them, but one idea of a child being the brain, the thinker, and explaining to the pen, and the pen just focuses on the writing. Again, managing that cognitive load, helping children to explain and self-explain, and then swapping over. That's a lovely technique. Share that with them. It's easy to do, and this is something that became apparent to me. Is I was sharing different techniques and bits and pieces. Some come from the WalkThrus as well. Little bits as well that feeds into, and I'll talk a little more of that in a second about our wider appraisal process. But what became apparent was, like anything, rather than motoring, continuing to find new techniques all the time, I thought, well, hang on a minute. It sounds crude, but I just created a little list of these techniques, and then I circle through them. Drip, 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 and then what I was seeing is things starting to take more with that constant little and often. Teachers going, oh yeah, that's really good. On a Friday morning, everyone's at the end of the week, they think, in a good mood, and the briefing, and that time to do it, not a Monday morning briefing where people are a bit swamped, and it's that Friday morning, oh yeah, okay, I might do that next week. Little things like that, like little 1% there, put a CPD book library in the staff room. And again, those books are only as good as the amount of people that people read them, right? But again, just having them there and being like, oh, and modeling that. So I model it all the time. I'm like, oh, let me just go. I tell you what, it's a fantastic bit in Motivated Teaching by Peps. I'm just going to go come to this. There's a look, see this bit here? Take it. Go on out. And I'd given out several books doing that. Just going like, I tell you what, there's a fantastic game in Shannon's book there that I know will. Let's go and I'm going to find it, linked it. So, oh yeah, that's good, isn't it? That's all linked to the national. Yeah. So, do you want to have it? Borrow it. Go and take it. That's what it's here for. It's what and we're growing that library. So I would like to eventually go down a different model with that. Not a different model, but a more structured model. I know Andrew Percival has a professional reading setup, which I talked to him about, and it's amazing. I mean, they dedicate a whole staff sessions to it, and they get to pick a book. And I think empowering people to do that and that reading culture, that professional development, is just amazing. So I will pinch wherever I can the expertise of people better than I, right? Literally, that's what, for me, good leadership is about that, right? Is go and pinch other things that are backed up by good research and backed up by, good results on the ground, and go, do you know what? Let's try that in our context. It might not work, but it's better than trying nothing, isn't it? If you do the same and nothing changes. So that's what I do. So that another 1% little strategy like that I've made sure that I've done every year, like when talking with things like that. And so they were like our little 1% as this, and I'm trying to think some other examples, like off the top of my head, sort of think about. But there are other things like that where I try and do lots of little things, little conversations about things, and sending around a little link to something, or having conversation with someone. Oh, there's a brilliant podcast on that. You need to. And I guess I'm fortunate that I consume so much educational reading and podcasts, and that I'm able to be a gateway a bit for them to access some of this stuff. And that's, for me, is like, as a gatekeeper, is an important job to bring where I can that to busy, time poor, busy teachers. So that's the 1%. That's kind of there. The other main sort of lever for our professional learning is our appraisal process, which has been a big shift this year. Big. We took the Chris Moyes' model of growing great teachers from his blogs, fantastic blogs, again, probably link those in the show notes. He developed a really smart, really grounded kind of appraisal process, which it taps into a lot of coaching elements and a lot of things around. You can see influences from Jim Knight's work. You can see, there's lots of different bits and pieces in there, which you can tell that he's very much read around that and developed it with that in mind. So what I sat down, and Lucy and I sat down at the start of last year, instructional coaching is obviously a hot topic right now, and it is proven to be a very powerful way of improving. We sat down and we said, right, how do we make the appraisal process, first of all, something that teachers properly engage with? Because let's come on now, let's call a spade here. We've sat in that bloody meeting at the end of the year with your Word document and gone, have you met this target that we set in October, which was to improve this and to do this? And it's just a nonsense. And I say this anecdotally, of course, and I'm not speaking for every school, because I'm sure there's many schools that do this tremendously well. However, my experience, and from what I know from my local context, and is that often the appraisal process is either too bitty and silly and not meaningful, or it's just broad nonsense. And you end up going, right, yeah, we'll fill this form in because we have to fill this form in because, it's appraisals again, isn't it? We got to get them done, and well, if you look at them like that, they're not going to mean anything. They're going to be a box tick. So that was one thing Lucy and I were like, this can't be a box tick anymore. We just can't. This is ridiculous. And that's what Chris Moyes is all about as well. It's about getting away from that. So we really have worked to, I fused together. And it's not perfect by any stretch. It's still, again, it's very much iterative. But we've fused together WalkThrus and Chris Moyes' Growing Great Teachers to produce something which teachers reflect on the teaching standards, and they reflect. And I might even be looking to change that again now with the new ECT, the ECF, and look at some of that stuff, because you know what, that's gold, that is. And looking at maybe us self-assessing and reflecting and coming to that appraisal start with having done a reflection of that and going, what is it in my teaching that I need to improve, or I want to improve as well, that I've identified. And they rate themselves out of 10 in terms of where they think they are now, where they think they could be. And then we go through this whole process and we talk and we pull out, and it's a lot of investment. We spend with all our staff, we spend over an hour with them. And it takes a lot from the resource and the capacity of leadership, but it's legwork is worth doing, because two things happen. One, we end up drilling down to a really refined goal, like a goal which could be as specific as, I want to work on my ability to scaffold effectively for for the children in my class who are potentially weaker with their writing structures. And I'm going to do this by focusing on a tiered question approach. I've gone off the top of my head there completely. But that's the target. And that's it. That's the target for the year. That's it. There's no 70% of combined in the class. Of course, we will talk about data in an end year appraisal. You can't not talk about data. We still have discussions about data, but it's not all resting on the data. The main thing for us is about growing great teachers, is making teachers better. We are an improving, not proving school. And we are like, right, how do we make our teachers better? How do you want to get better as a teacher? And by spending that time investing in and it takes, it's like it's a coaching session. That's what it is, right? And we get right to the heart of like what they think they need to support with. And it's that balance of us as experienced leaders guiding that a bit as well, knowing the context of them as a teacher and helping them steer them a little bit, particularly when they're more novice and when they're earlier in their career. With more experienced teachers, they tend to be able to drive it more, and then we just very lightly guide the conversation down towards where we think would help. And then we hone in and using the clusters in WalkThrus. We develop like a goal plan, and what I end up having is I have a one sheet, an A3 one sheet for all my teaching staff with their CPD goal, their goal for the year. So I can look on one sheet of paper in my office. You know, it's hidden. Obviously, nobody goes in to look at them all. Oh, so is it? However, saying that, interestingly, one thing we started to discuss and develop, we didn't because the lockdown threw us all out this year. It kind of blew the process, which is really annoying. But where we have teachers working on, so you can see everybody's individual autonomy, their goals, their thing, their improvement, they've developed it, empowered them. They have these clusters to support from the WalkThrus, and we help them then use and access them. The next thing for us is to start an actual coaching model next year where teachers are supporting each other to develop that. And what we would do then is look potentially at grouping where we have themes. So looking at our overall, Bob is here with his target here, Janet's here with her target here, and they're similar actually. They're working both on scaffolding, slightly different subjects or a slightly nuanced difference in their goals, but they're both on scaffolding. So let's put them together in a group, in a strategic group, and then they meet and they work together. So it's this kind of thinking around appraisal, which I've never been in an organization that does it like that, or does it, or has that amount of time where it actually genuinely, you get to the end of the year and you are better at what you do because of it. Surely that's it, right? Surely that's why we do appraisal, to get better at things, right? So, and I've never come out of an appraisal before with my arbitrary targets and gone, oh yeah, I feel I've improved in that this year. Yeah, come on, and I know hopefully there'll be many people sitting along, or the two people that are listening, sitting along going, yeah, that was me, you know. And for me, that, and I'm happy that I've done this. I think I've shared it before. Again, into the show notes, no problem at all. Those documents that I kind of amended. If you are WalkThrus, School You Access WalkThrus, I put those together, merged them to fit into something that you could amend and take it further and iterate it and make it for your context. But we found it really rewarding. We found it really frustrating that we weren't able to carry it all the way through properly because of the lockdown. We're excited about being able to roll that next year. But yeah, that for us, because what that does as well, going back to the question, professional learning, that enables professional learning, because it's not then just, oh yeah, well, here's the target. It's like, okay, here's a goal, a really like refined goal. Here's some support materials that are going to really help you. Here's a support system of coaching that's going to help you practice and give deliberate practice to get better at it and to learn professionally how to be better at what you do.
It's those focused teaching assignments that Alan and Sims talk about in the Teacher Gap, isn't it? You know, how do we actually make people better teachers? And you know, the way you explained that so clearly, it should be really straightforward. How have we not managed to come to the point where we can do this consistently for all the people who want to be effective teachers? You know, so you're joking about the number of people listening. I think every school leader should be listening to you talk about this, because it makes so much sense on so many levels, and you've explained it so clearly that, you know, I think any inexperienced school leaders or anyone who's thinking about for instance, their approach to appraisal will have a lot to learn, because you can see in the time, you know, from episode 1 where you had these plans to this episode, and you're talking about what impact that's had and how that's refined over time. I think it'll be immensely useful. When you look at the teacher standards and you think, there are about 16 different small steps before you can meet this one target. Why is this one sentence? It feels like we're moving towards that as a system. So fingers crossed, But I think if anyone wants to see this in action, I think they should be jumping into your direct messages on Twitter to get some visits to Staplehurst once visits are back on the cards.
Oh, absolutely. More the merrier. More the merrier.
So I think that actually leads really nicely onto the next one. What have you learned about the implementation of WalkThrus this year? Because that was a big focus when we first chatted, wasn't it?
Yeah. So obviously, you can see some of that implementation there coming into our appraisal process. But it's not just that. It's been written into our policy. WalkThrus is now in our policy, our teaching and learning policy. It's what we refer to as our underlying principles for instruction, and how we communicate, how we have a shared dialogue in our school. Caveat: it is not domain specific, and I think that is the thing I've learned this year. Right, biggest thing I've learned with it. So, for example, questioning in history isn't necessarily going to look exactly the same as questioning in science and maths. You must be careful applying blanket pedagogy to domain specificity, and I think that's been a bit of a learning curve. And I do think there's more work to be done there, and I think people need to be very mindful and wary of. And I know it's been talked about, the death by Rosenshine tick list curriculum, right? We don't want that. We want smart, reflective practitioners who are able to engage with materials and go, do you know what? Actually, specifically for science here, I need to think about X, Y, and Z, because that is dictated by the subject discipline and by what is needed from, for example, the second order concepts. And I don't know the answer yet. I don't know the answer about how that fits. That's something I'm thinking about at the minute, and I'm spending the summer sort of thinking about how we refine that. I know WalkThrus, the number 2's come out, and it again, a superb piece of work. We haven't got that yet, and we're not going there yet, because again, I'm not rushing, and I would urge people to I'm not saying don't buy it, right, or don't get involved in it. It's just that's come out in quick succession, and you now end up with a lot of stuff to focus on, right? Again, to go back to Chris, everything's priority, nothing's priority. So you be smart about when and how and where you roll things out and do things. And less is more sometimes. Just focus on what you need to focus on and refine it, take feedback, and be specific. Don't just, what you can't do is be like, right, WalkThrus. Right, we've got that. Okay, coaching, brilliant. Let's chuck it. Let's just chuck everything at it and go, hope it works, and just try and ram it all together. It's not going to work, right? Your teachers will go, what? There's 1,000 things here. What are we doing here? So be smart about your implementation of it. Think carefully about how you pull it out. So we only focused on several WalkThrus this year. We looked at cold calling. We looked at questioning, we looked at scaffolding, and we looked at positive behaviour. We started with behaviour because obviously that has a place to start at the beginning of the year, and we focused on those. And one of the things we did again, was to have line of sight cards. So we created line of sight cards where our teachers have them in their classrooms, just on their desk in somewhere where they're teaching. They see it as a visual reminder with a little symbol, and then just a bullet point that they create to have that autonomy and that ownership of it, just as a focus. And we talk about it all the time. And then it could be in one of the little briefings, or we do on a Friday, or the start of a staff meeting, we go, right, quick revisit. So questioning, what are some of the key things that we, and retrieval with staff, and the next place I want to go with it is the culture of deliberate practice. I was listening to Peps talk about the ECF on one of the STEP webinars. And another thing we've done is we've moved our school to work with the STEP Teaching Hub. They're going to be taking our ECTs through next year. which I'm working with Matt Swain and Tom Gary and Charlotte. It's very deeply, I'm jealous of our ECTs, to be quite honest with you, having access to such high quality training. Yeah, my induction mentor, Jack, my head of Key Stage 2, fantastic practitioner, fantastic leader. He's got all the right sort of minerals to lead. He's already looking at, at this deliberate practice model, and we were talking about it and going, you saying to me, it's powerful, isn't it? And he's like, how do you try things out together? It's getting over that kind of like role play, almost like, oh God, we've got to do this. Once you get past that and that becomes norms, wow, I mean, that's going to be huge. That's my next challenge. That's my next challenge as a school, is get that culture in, because then we can refine the walkthroughs more. And I know as well, I need to look at, is it Emma Turner, I want to say, has linked the walkthroughs to the ECF. Am I right on that?
It would make sense, because I think Tom and Emma do a lot of work together on the Mind the Gap podcast, don't they? So, we can obviously check and put in the show notes. I think the first thing that's come to mind here whenever you're saying about role play, I think it's the fact that not all role play is made equal, because you've got imagine what it's like to be a space hopper while a child is sitting on it. And then you've got something like deliberate practice, which is, much more impactful potentially. I think that's the hurdle to get over with. Is this a good use of my time? Sorry for interrupting. Just it came to mind as you were saying that.
No, absolutely. You're dead right, and it's about that meaningful deliberate practice, isn't it? And like you say, the role play being the right role play, practicing things. Like you say, we try things out on the children, don't we? Like so much, rather than actually trying things out beforehand. Like, why do we use them as the guinea pig? I mean, that's So to sort of summarize that, it's a fantastic resource. It's an important and powerful resource for schools to have a shared dialogue around the best principles of instruction and pedagogy. Be careful with domain specificity and with being too generic around the utility of the book. Be sure to be thorough when you are applying it to subjects, and also be mindful that if you are going to go into coaching and use a coaching model and deliberate practice, do some reading, do some talking, read Josh Goodrich's stuff, talk to people, have a think about what that looks like, because coaching's really complicated. It's really not the magic bullet that sometimes it can be portrayed as. It's nuanced and it's complicated at times, depending on the level of expertise of the person being coached or coaching. I have a qualification in coaching. I have a level 5 from the Institute of Leadership Management qualification, and I still don't think I fully understand the best way to roll coaching out, which is why I'm trying to be ever so cautious about how this happens. Yeah, so that would be my advice. Absolutely use it. It's a fantastic resource. Use it with caution. It's not just like the answer to all your prayers. Done. There we go. This is finished. What it is a massive support to you with your curriculum development and your teaching and learning development in your school.
I sort of landed on a coaching model quite early in my career, and sort of developed that over a number of years. And one of my schools that we were talking about, they've really enjoyed the fact that that's the model I've been taking in developing their teachers. And what happens, say in 4 or 5 years' time when I'm not around, do we have the coaching knowledge to keep the progress of the school going forward? And I said to them, the walkthroughs came up naturally in the conversation. I said to him, I think for inexperienced coaches, it gives them a model and a framework within which to operate until they've refined their skills. Have you done anything with for instance, your middle leaders or your more experienced teachers who want to develop their coaching? Have you done anything to sort of formalize that this year?
No, we haven't actually gone to that point yet, because when you're sort of at that, it was something that I am sort of keen to do, but wary. I was wary this year of not overloading, and I think that's a really important point to consider. So yeah, no, I didn't done anything specifically formal with them, but it's that the principles of coaching and instructional coaching stuff are tremendous, well documented. I think it's something that I want to do it right. I don't want to rush it. I want to make sure that staff have enough of a lead into this one. This is not one I'm pacing through quickly, because I really think it can go wrong. And if you get it wrong, I feel like that can be enormously damaging for this sort of thing, because it can be such a massively powerful tool and thing to embed into the culture of your school. Once you get it wrong, repairing it for me seems like it would be a daunting thing. So I'm very cautious with it about how to do this right, slowly, steadily, building a trust from staff. And the first place, like I said, to do that is through deliberate practice. That's the first place for me. Is like we start with that deliberate practice, getting comfortable at that with each other. We build coaching from there, because then there's that thing of like, okay, there's a trust here, because it's massively reliant on trust. That whole process built on a bed of trust. If you don't have it, people don't trust it, don't feel like they can talk openly or talk in a way which will ultimately lead them to improve. You're wasting time. So yeah. No, haven't done it, but very much excited about it, but wary.
Yeah, that's fair. That was just an off the cuff question. That wasn't on any list of questions I sent you. It's just really interesting. Just want to see what you've done with regards to that. And I reckon, Tom Sheridan talks about lethal mutations quite a bit. I reckon he'd be on board with the advice you're sort of given in terms of how your experience of implementation has gone this year. I find it very difficult to believe that, he wouldn't be nodding along. And actually, what I fancy doing is asking him and Ollie to come on with some teachers who have implemented in their school and really, get under the skin of how this looks in primary. So if he happens to listen and I haven't reached out, then he should be expecting a message pretty soon.
That's something I would love to A, be a part of, B, listen to, because I think I would love to learn from others and learn from them as well about implementation, because that's the bit that is quite important, I think. Like you say, with lethal mutations, it's very, very important to get that right. And I'm not saying that I've got it right by any stretch. I think we've done some good things, but you never really know, do you? You never really know until years down the line when things sort of really embed and start to have a big impact.
So if you had to condense your approach to leadership into a set of guiding principles, what would they be?
Okay, so I would say, and this is kind of working, again, taken a lot of advice from Matt Swain as well. He's helped me enormously. I owe him a debt of gratitude as well this year, with how to go about things and to try things and to be courageous. And I had this conversation with him months ago. It's all about leverage. It's all about levers and about what levers you pull. What's the highest leverage that is going to have that impact that shifts things? There are 3 levers you can pull in schools, and you kind of pull them at different rates. And this is how Matt explained it to me: is like, it's curriculum, CPD, and it's teaching and learning. And those 3 levers, how you pull them, and when you pull them, and what wouldn't you pull at the same time, and how much you pull them. That's what leadership's about. Like, it's about those things. So getting that balance right, getting those balance of what levers to pull at what points to create the highest leverage so that you move things, whilst also being aware of pace of change and aware of your context and your staff. What does it look like? Is this a young professionals inner city London school where you have young teachers hungry for, Or are we going to a leafy suburban school where you have teachers with very established teachers, been a long time with families, and who have very different lives to those that I described in the previous school? Those things are massive. You have to consider them when you're doing school improvement. Like, you can't not consider those things. So you get all of the structures, all of the systems in place, but those systems and structures and things that you do will only work with the buy-in from the staff that you're working with. Again, it comes back to building trust, building and empowering staff to be able to engage with that, engage with those systems, engage with deliberate practice, engage with coaching and with, reading, professional reading, all those sorts of things you want them to do. Well, necessarily it's not just going to happen to a busy, skilled, experienced teacher who can always get better, because we can always get better, might not want to get better, happy with a lot, busy, family life, whatever. How then, that's the nuance of like, what do you do then? And for me, the principle would be to build a trust there through dialogue, through the culture you develop in your school for improvement, improving, not proving. It has to stem from that. It has to stem from that low stakes but high improvement model. Like, it can't. So, and then it's which levers do you pull then to do that? So which one are you going to pull next to leverage that bit and to leverage this bit and to bring those teachers on? What do they need next? What do we need to pull? What do we need to look at? What and it's a constant look at those, pulling those levers all the time and going, right, we need to leverage that now. And the way to do that is by having a really open culture, having a trusting staff that you need to build through avoiding fear culture, avoiding toxicity, avoiding flippancy and reactive behavior. Reactive behavior and responsive behavior are very different, and we want to be responsive, not reactive. We don't want to snapping into decisions because, we want to be looking at what's coming in and going, right, okay, yeah, my gut is to go, whoa, but actually, hang on, step back. What do we need? Let's talk, right, and then be sensible. And there are pinch points and times in school improvement and times of the year where you do have to be directive at times. You do have to direct sometimes. There are times where, as a leader, you need to do that because things are just the way they are, and it's not, in an ideal world, we would try and avoid it, but you can't. There are things that you just have to go, well, that has to happen. So we're going to do that. And yeah, we can reflect on it later down the line, but for now, that just has to happen. And it's going to annoy some people, right? You can't be a yes man as a deputy head. You can't, you're not going to please everybody all the time. And I know it's cliche. What I'm saying here is cliche. And it's been said before, but it is worth saying again, because it's so easy to slip into that trap of like, yeah, we'll sort that out. Yeah. But if you say, yeah, we'll sort that out to everybody, then you're not going to sort it out because you'll pull all the levers at once and it's not going to be chaos, right? You've got to think about what's going to leverage that thing, what is going to do it. So we, in our school, we do something called theme walks where we didn't want to call them learning walks because we want to call them theme walks, where they have themes. We look for themes, we look for things. We walk a lot, we just walk all the time. And we agree on principles like, for example, we don't take notepads into classrooms. We walk with all different leaders and all different teachers. When we go into classrooms, we smile. We don't point. We don't whisper. We go in, we observe, we talk to children, we are respectful, we come out, then we make our notes to try and help teachers feel like it's not, I'm coming in to, come down on you or cast these big judgments. We will look for things and see what we spot, and we may pick up like, okay, well, hang on, got a little bit of a, seems to be a little bit of a, the routines are a little bit slacking here, the entries or whatever it is to classrooms, or there's a little issue with, the questioning in maths seems to be a little bit off, there seems to be a little bit, people aren't probing deep enough or having, being explicit enough with the modeling of reasoning, or, whatever it is that might come from a theme walk. If it's a maths theme walk going out, that looks for those themes and what they pick up. We then come back and we sit down and we go, right, what level is this? How immediate is it? Like, what is this? Something that it needs immediate attention? Is it immediate? Is it medium term or is it long term? What is we categorize each of the themes. And then we go to the next step, which is like, okay, so once we categorize those themes, okay, it's an immediate thing. We need to leverage something. What's the highest leverage? What's the thing that can have the biggest impact on this immediately? So, okay, maybe a message goes out, or in briefing on a Friday, we need to do a little something, or we adapt our CPD that week for our staff meeting, and we build in something to address the thing that is urgent and needs. It may be something like that, the reasoning one that I just said. That's not an urgent thing. You're not going to solve that overnight. That's going to take a writing of professional development and the delivery of something as a responsive model. It's a responsive model, right? And it goes, okay, we put that onto our strategic plan as build it into the CPD program here. It's going to be picked up, some deliberate practice next year. That's the we practice modeling out some reasoning and what have you. And then we go again. And then the next thing, and this is the big thing, is we walk again. We then walk again. Because we walk all the time, we walk again, and we have a good handle on what we've leveraged, what we've expected to see, what we're coming back to, and we're keeping a track all the time on themes that are coming up and what we've done CPD to it. We record it in a document. We have it open every SLT meeting. We go, right, where we at? We leveraged that. We went out. We saw that. That's better. That's looking better. Yeah, you see, yeah. We so and so went out and we walked and we saw that was better. And it's a constant rolling cycle of improvement. So it's responsive and it's not like set out. We set some stuff out across it, but we keep then spacing our CPD program to do that. So their levers being pulled all the time there. Some of them are curriculum that needs to be pulled. One of them's actually we've spotted that in the reading here, the texts aren't broad enough for blah, 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 blah. That's a curriculum lever. So we need to pull that, right? So that's a long-term goal. We'll put that on the thing. We build in time in English leader. Or it's a immediate, like, the routines aren't sharp enough in the morning. We're losing time, children coming from the playground and it's sloppy and we need to sort that out. Okay, well, that's an instant, immediate directive sort of thing where we go, right, okay, hang on. It's not done in a punitive way. It's done in a, right, okay, we noticed this. Can we all focus on this next week? We'll walk again next week to check how everybody's getting on with it. Okay, so-and-so is still struggling with it. You need some support. We can help you practice some of these routines with children. I'll model it for you. We'll model it. We'll talk about entry routines. Yeah. Bang, that's that lever pulled. So again, that probably coming to teaching and learning, that's that lever pulled there, and it's pulled quite hard, or is this like you say, is this a CPD thing? Is this something that actually teachers need some support with scaffolding or questioning or something, and actually it's a long-term CPD project and then two levers pulled at once then, because that's then teaching and learning and CPD. So it's about pulling these levers all the time and the right balance of how much you pull them, when to pull them. And ultimately, by pulling the levers, you leverage improvement. And you do it in a measured way. You do it in a way which balances immediate, medium term, long term. And it's just constantly rolling and constantly reflective. So that's kind of the model. And again, I all credit there to Matt Swain on that, because I take no credit for that at all. All I've done is used his model and made it so and I know they do a similar thing in STEP academies, and it's been massively powerful for us, shifting that culture away from like silly observations that just don't end up improving anything, and actually taking that away from teachers, and actually just teachers having that open door policy culture in school where you can do that. So I would say that they're some of our principles that we work off those leverages. It's all about leverages, and be strategic, be consistent, and listen to your staff. Like otherwise, it won't work. If you do it blindly and you ramrod and stuff, then you'll end up losing the will of the staff, losing that support, which is, like I say, losing the trust, that the bed of trust that everything has to sell.
I think that's a really powerful model. Seeing what can happen when teachers view those walks as a force for good rather than a stick that they will eventually be beaten with, makes a massive difference. A lot of the stuff that you're describing calls from my playbook, like the notebook in the back pocket, make your notes, because my memory is shocking. I need to write down, episodic memory particularly, and I need to write that stuff down pretty quickly, or it'll just go into the mess that is in my head. Removing yourself from the accountability process, and this is something that's going to help you become a better teacher. You get to the point where eventually people want that to happen. Come and see this. What does that look like with this? When you teach with me, those are the kind of requests you get when you have established that this is something that is positive. This is something that will not be used against you. And I think people really engage with that. And if we think about the observation model and the intense dread that some people can feel when they've got that high pressure, one-off observation, I think the difference and the potential is massive. It can't be overstated how strong an approach and how sensible an approach you guys are taking. So that makes a lot of sense. And so we may have covered the next bit, but what have you learned in your first year as deputy head?
Right, I'll keep this relatively short, like I say, because we have touched on quite a lot of things that I've learned. Again, the first thing, you're new to deputy headship, depending if you're new to the school or if you're new to coming to deputy headship within a school, because that's different as well. That's I was to a new setting, so but often it can be in a school that you step up to a deputy headship, which I think is probably harder. I actually think that's probably more challenging because things are more embedded. You've been seen in a certain way, and now you've got to be seen in a different way. And I think actually, I can't speak from experience on that. I could only, again, I'm only making an observation here that might be more difficult. However, what I will say is I think this is still applicable to that scenario. You are going to need to support stuff that you won't like. You're going to need to support some stuff for a while that you like. We need to change that, right? But you've got to go with it, and you've got to nod along, and you've got to say, yeah, great, and offer that support. And you've got to build trust. You've got to build a trust, and you've got to build relationships with staff from that position. To build that from your new role, and that because everything. Not everything. Most things work on a trust basis, work on a relationship basis, work on a fact that your staff go, yeah, all right, I'll go that, because they see you and they go, yeah, he's going to help me out. He's got my back if things go wrong, and I know I can come and talk to him if I'm struggling with something. They've got to think that. No, it just doesn't happen. You're not going to turn up and get that, or you're not just going to step into a role in your school. It's different from what you previously were. And all of a sudden that is there. It may be there more so if you are in a school because people know you already. So that might be the case, but then it can work opposite. So you may have established relationships with people. People go, in the past, this happened, so I'm going to hold this against you. So there's probably that element as well to deal with, which is another challenge. Yeah, support stuff that you might not like for a bit, and then take your time with change, which takes me on to my second point, which is change management. It's vital. Change management is the biggest learning curve for me this year, and I think as a deputy head, if you're coming into that, be mindful. If you haven't been sort of exposed to much change, like as in you enacting change, big changes on staff, be mindful that is as humans, we don't like change. We like routine. We like our structures. We like things to be the way they are. So when you start going to people, don't do that anymore, do this. Right, we're not doing that anymore, do this. People go, ooh, there's that natural thing in people going, what do you mean? Well, I've got to read all the resources. What? I've got to replan all that. I've got to, anything. And then that's where they go. That's where teachers go straight away in their mind. I did. I still do to an extent, right? It's like, what? Oh, hang on. We've got to rewrite all that. We've got to read it. So be careful and mindful about the pace of change and what you do it. Now, I can't say this is the pace of change because every context, every school is different. Every journey that schools are on is different. So certain schools will need, faster pace because of the situation. Others won't need that pace. You can slowly do things and roll things out, win the buy-in. And I think to do that, you need, one thing that I've found quite powerful is teams. So working parties and teams and things. Get people on board. So go and speak to people and empower them and say, you're a fantastic practitioner. I need your support. Can you help me? We're going to try this. And that's how so Chris is reading, how we rolled it out. We created a working party for reading. And I just approached some teachers who'd shown interest talking about Chris's book, because we shared it obviously with staff, talking about his book and sort of speaking to them. And do you find that interesting? And having conversations. I kind of knew straight away the people who were engaging with it from those 1% tactics that I talked about earlier. And I went, right, I'm going to talk to them. Guys, should we get together? We're looking, you guys are spot on with X, Y, and Z. Would love your expertise, would love your help in starting to try out and test out and sort of stress test some stuff with, is this sound, and people are like, yeah, okay. And then give them some time out of class, give them some release, get them to, get them to come back, get them to see each other. And that's how we did it. And basically it grew to the point where I had TAs knocking on my door going, I hear there's a book. There is literally, that is how much that permeated across our place. And we all understand it. We all understand the vision of it at the end of the. So I would say that, look at working parties, look at tapping into the people who are keen and getting them on board and get them to lead. I then got them to lead things, them to lead CPD, them to lead, not me. Because if it's just me, that's the thing to be careful of. You're a deputy, me, blah, 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 blah. It's just constant, another thing from the deputy head. No, if you've got other things to come, which you will have, get other people to introduce them, because that in itself distributes it a bit, and it's then not just one constant machine that's, so that will be my second point. So change management is vital. And I would say, thirdly, listen and be reflective. Sometimes daggers in the heart, truth hurts, right? When you pose questionnaires out, you read them, crying in my office, into my flat one. But no, listen, be reflective. Like, you have to do that with your staff. It gives staff a sense of autonomy. It gives them a sense of place in your school. So make sure everybody has a voice as well. Now, what I will say about that, as part of that listening process, is giving people a voice. How is everybody heard in your staff and structures? What are the acoustics? What are the structural acoustics? What I'll say is, we're very open, we're very distributed. We have big meetings where we have people in and we all talk around a table. Balance the structural acoustics with productivity, because yes, make sure your structural acoustics are balanced. Make sure that everybody's heard. But if everybody's heard and everybody's just giving their two penneth, nothing gets done. It then ends up being this collaborative mess, and everyone's stressed out, and there's too many voices. So how your job as a steward in that role, as a new deputy head, is to guide and balance the structural acoustics within your meetings and in your building, making sure that people are heard but are not drowned out or overpowered, but also not doing the drowning out or overpowering, and to make sure that the balance in the mix, if you will, the sound mix is right. And you're kind of at the mixing desk going, right, okay, what do we need to push up? What do we need to bring down? What do we need to, but you're making sure that all the mics are plugged in. That's key. Support stuff that's not necessarily you're not happy with. Manage your change, use those teams, and bit by get people buy-in. And listen and balance out those structural acoustics, get behind that mixing desk, plug those mics in, and make sure that everything is nice and balanced.
I think that's really good advice for anyone who's aspiring to be a deputy head teacher out there. You know, if I'd known that stuff when I first became a deputy, then I think I would have sort of fit into the role a lot more easily, you know, because it's a hard balance to find being a deputy head teacher. You know, I think if I look back on my time, I tried to separate myself from the staff too much, you know, because I've got my personality and then I've got my school leader personality. And it was only really realizing that I wasn't showing enough of myself and wasn't, you know, there wasn't enough to invest in, that I've been able to, over the last 4 years, really strike that balance. You know, I think, you know, almost, I don't want to say perfectly, but I don't think I can improve on the sort of relationships I've built. You know, they're pretty strong relationships, but it was because of realizing how difficult that balance is to strike, because I'd gone, like I said, gone into the situation where I wanted to be seen as the, you know, as sensible and, you know, hardworking, but you need to give some of you over as well, I think, you know. So I think aspiring deputies will find that really useful. So I think the last thing to talk about then, Lloyd, is you're speaking at Research Ed Surrey this term, I think. Tell me about your session.
So I'm actually speaking with Matt Swain. We're doing a joint session on leadership, on school improvement. So, I'll read the blurb out for you. So sort of what, I think that's easiest, you know, to sort of explain, and then I'll elaborate a little bit, obviously. So effective primary school improvement can be influenced by three levers: teaching, learning, CPD, and curriculum. With an inclusive whole school exploration and identification of themes, it's possible to promote effective, salient improvements that drive rigor and standards, whilst empowering teachers to be the best they can be. Through a lens of leverage, we will explore a practical approach that demonstrates just how responsiveness can enable powerful change. So we're going to tap into some of the ideas I talked about earlier, refine them a little bit, go into a little bit deeper, a little bit more depth, and talk a bit more about how change managing people, nudge, all these sorts of things. Matt will talk from his extensive expertise.
Excellent. Well, I think anyone who's listening to this will be trying their very best to go and see that session. You know, I'm definitely going to be there, you know, because I want to hear more about your combined approach to leadership, because, you know, from what I've heard today, you know, it seems really powerful, really practical, and I think will be of immense value to lots of teachers. So I think all I said is, Lloyd, thank you very much for joining us once again. I was very keen that, you know, we didn't really know what the podcast was when we did that pilot. We were just sort of having a conversation, you know, and so I was very keen to bring you back in to give you a sort of proper shot, so to speak. But it's been fascinating from start to finish, and, you know, I reckon we'll definitely catch up on the post season 3 chats as we go forward, you know, into what will, you know, towards 2022. But yeah, thank you very much, Lloyd.
No, thank you again, as always. Absolute pleasure to be part of TDaPE, and it's just lovely to talk about something I'm so passionate about, and to have an opportunity to be on such a special podcast. Really, I really genuinely am grateful, and to have been the very first and invited back again is humbling. So thank you.
Do you want to sing the theme tune?